but none of the adults around me read Percy Jackson, so none of them knew what I was talking about.
Oh,
they were
cool,
like,
Sherry.
"Oh yeah, okay, here's some candy."
What's good? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I'm a grown man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I'm reading them now in a quest to determine if this is a book series that we've all been sleeping on. But I'm not on this quest alone. I'm joined today by a familiar face, voice, editing prowess. It's someone that if you listen to the credits of The Newest Olympian, or if you just listen to The Newest Olympian, you would know her, but you don't know her because if an editor does their job well, it inherently means you can't tell they've done anything. It is the editor of The Newest Olympian, Sherry Guo. Sherry, how's it going?
Hi, Mike. It's going great. I'm enjoying New York. Unfortunately, I leave tomorrow, but yeah, it's been good.
I'm glad you're here. We are in person in the studio making it happen, and you get the joy of being able to edit yourself afterwards. A fun benchmark that every podcaster must overcome, and I think honestly has turned me into a better podcaster and better public speaker is when I would edit early episodes of my podcasts, I would hear myself and say, "Stop saying like so much. Why are you so annoying? Why do you do this?" So I think it's turned me into a better person because there's no one more annoying than yourself that you're editing.
Yeah, I had to do a podcasting project for my winter quarter at school, and when I was editing the first round, the amount of times I said like, it was between every other word. So I just rewrote my entire script, cutting out all the likes, and then read it as if I was talking to someone so I wouldn't sound ridiculous. And it ended up cutting out 30 seconds of my entire project.
That'll do it. That'll do it. No, it's good. Speaking of annoying things, now that we have you on the pod, what is the most annoying thing that I still do? Is there anything in the process where like, oh, Mike, again, am I doing anything that's that one, makes your life hard, or two, would make me sound funny? I'm putting myself on blast, basically.
I guess it would just be when you mix up names and I leave audio notes.
Gosh, yes.
Because sometimes I can't tell if they're purposeful or if they were accidental, because usually your guests will correct you, but then other times they don't.
Yeah. I never share them because I feel like it is a private thing and it's usually too late for me to ask you like, hey, is it okay if I put this on Patreon? And I think it's shown your comfort level with the show is like early on in editing, you would say, oh, Mike, I think when you said Poseidon here, you meant Percy, but you might just want to check. And now it's like, hey, Mike, you said this. My favorite though is, which has happened a couple of different times, me learning I've been saying a word wrong my whole life because you are better at language and you point things out. And I think I talked about this on the show, but until you pointed out that I've been saying weary and wary as just weary the whole time and not knowing there's two different words, I very much appreciate you coming in and correcting things. And then also when you interject and tell stories, because what's important and why I thought it would be very nice to have you on the show is that you're another Gen Z voice that the people need to hear. And I appreciate every now and then when you've checked in as Gen Z vibe check that I get to hear, which is very much appreciated. But that all aside, what is your history with the Percy Jackson books?
So my history with the Percy Jackson books is actually related to Harry Potter because I have a younger sister. She's a year younger than me. And when she was in 3rd grade and I was in 4th grade, she came home from the Scholastic Book Fair with a Harry Potter box set.
Oh, cool.
And then she was like, yeah, I'm going to read the Harry Potter books. So then I, as the older sibling who always accused her of copying me, could not be the Harry Potter sibling. So I decided to read Percy Jackson instead. But yeah, I liked Greek mythology. And then I just got really absorbed into the books because I really identified with Annabeth to the point where I DIY'd a Halloween costume of Annabeth when I was in 6th grade, because that was the year that theoretically, if I were a demigod, I would have gone to Camp Half-Blood as a 12-year-old.
Right.
So I very much identified with Annabeth, and I genuinely thought I was a child of Athena secretly. And so, yeah, that's my history with the series. And I haven't kept up that well because by the time the Lost Hero series was coming out, by the time the 4th book came out, I was in high school. So I stopped reading for fun. So I've only read the first 3 of those books, but I just got the library book, audiobook of The Lost Hero. So I'm going to be starting that part of my Percy Jackson journey soon. But I've reread the main series so many times because they just never fail to make me laugh.
Amazing. So when you got that first box set in 4th grade, What year was that?
So the year that I started reading Percy Jackson was 2010. So after all the main books had already come out.
Okay.
I feel like I went through them in like a week.
Okay, yeah, you just blitzed through them all in one sitting.
Yeah, and 2 summers ago, during the height of COVID, the first summer, I bought a box set and read the whole series again in a span of like 10 hours in a row.
Amazing. Just for anyone doing mental math at home, I normally don't do this, but as Gen Z person, how old are you?
I'm 22.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. So for everyone complaining about me not having enough young people on, we're doing it. We're back again. Look at me. We've dipped into the fountain of youth, which is that I'm an old fossil and now I'm having guests that are still in their 20s. That's fantastic. I do remember way back our working relationship started when you were the Potterless and other stuff summer intern. And when we were first discussing the internship, at first you mentioned that Meddling Adults was the podcast you were most interested in working on and Potterless was just whatever. And then I did mention, I'm also going to be starting this Percy Jackson show too. And you were very excited.
Yes, very much. Because Potterless I thought was really interesting because I also never read the Harry Potter series growing up. So everything I know about Harry Potter is from Potterless and the Super Carlin Brothers on YouTube.
Nice.
Because I watched all of their like Harry Potter theory videos when I was bored and they were recommended to me by the YouTube algorithm.
Makes sense. Well, I'm glad that you are now in a position where you are editing episodes of a show that you know everything about and you can laugh at me being silly and guessing things wrong. And speaking of that, let's get into it. So we are here to cover chapter 8 and we'll see how much of chapter 9 we get into or if we even get to it of The Sea of Monsters. But chapter 8 is called We Board the Princess Andromeda. And as I've been doing, I've been trying to guess what happens in this chapter. Pretty easy chapter title to guess here, given that chapter 7 ended with Hermes telling Percy, hey, get on that ship. So I feel like they're going to get on the aforementioned ship. That was the guess that I wrote in my notes. So Annabeth and Tyson walk up to Percy and they say that they heard him saying, quote, bad things are attacking. And Percy says, I didn't say that. And Annabeth is confused, but then she sees the bags that Hermes gave to Percy and gets even more confused. And Percy just relays the whole Hermes conversation to them. And I guess they never really explained it. Was it a trick that Hermes did to disguise his voice so that it sounded like Percy was calling for them?
That's what I thought. Or I guess like he's like the trickster god. So maybe he just like planted stuff in their heads.
Right. I gathered that Hermes did this. I wonder how he did it. Did he trick the wind to sound like Percy's voice? Did he possess birds to chirp? Did he take over a parrot?
Maybe he used George and Martha.
Oh, God, George and Martha. I forgot about them because it had been so long since I had read them. I recorded the chapter 7 episode so long ago. But man, 2 chapters without them in it is too many. I need them back. I need them to become permanent fixtures.
I don't know how you're stopping after every chapter. I was listening to this on audiobook because I was like on the subway and everything, so it was just easier. Mm-hmm. And I've already listened to the audiobook of The Sea of Monsters twice through.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it is truly hard, but I know it's for the good of the show because when I get stuff wrong, it's very funny. So when he's done relaying the Hermes situation, he can hear the harpies coming. So they really got to kick things into gear. Annabeth says, we have to do the quest. Percy brings up, but we could get expelled if we do it. And Annabeth says, that doesn't matter. If we don't succeed on this quest, there will be no camp to be expelled from. So Percy then starts to remind Annabeth of her promise to Chiron. And she corrects him, saying, all I did was promise to keep you safe. And the only way that I can keep you safe is by joining you on the quest. Classic twisting things into her favor. What a smart, wise girl. So she starts to say that Tyson can stay back and tell people what's up, but Tyson says that he wants to come. Annabeth doesn't really want him to, which makes narrator Percy think there's got to be something that she's not telling him. But you think, Percy? Come on. It's painfully obvious at this point. Tyson and Annabeth look to Percy to make a decision here, and Percy notices that the cruise ship is getting farther away. Narrator Percy admits that part of him doesn't want Tyson to come. After 3 days in close quarters with Tyson, getting teased by campers and embarrassed often, Percy kind of just wants some space, which again is one of those moments where I am sad, but also I appreciate Percy's honesty, and it's something that is relatable and understandable, but I hope by the end, we get Percy full-fledged loving and appreciating Tyson.
Yeah, this was a sad moment.
Yeah, it's sad, but it's understandable. but it's still sad. So narrator Percy also reveals that he is concerned with how helpful Tyson would be. He's just a kid by Cyclops standards, basically a 7 or 8 year old, mentally at least. So he's afraid that Tyson wouldn't be able to bring a lot to the table. Thankfully, as someone who's read chapter 9, Tyson immediately proves his worth, which is great. But Percy then hears the Harpies getting closer and he decides, okay, Tyson has to come. And he says to the two of them that Tantalus is going to punish Tyson for Annabeth and Percy being gone. So we can't do that to him. He's got to come. So I'm glad he made the right decision in the end. Annabeth says, quote, Percy, we're going to Polyphemus's island. Polyphemus is an S-I-K ... a C-Y-K. And the narrator Percy says, she stamped her foot in frustration. As smart as she was, Annabeth was dyslexic too. We could have been there all night while she tried to spell Cyclops. I will maybe have to save this for a future episode if we do another check-in here. But does being dyslexic make you automatically bad at spelling?
I don't know. For me, this reminded me of when I was in 4th grade. I got 2nd place in the spelling bee because I couldn't remember how to spell the word awkward. I forgot that there was...
How awkward.
I don't know which letter I forgot, but the girl that I was competing against was my best friend, and she was really good at being able to see the letters in her head.
Oh, nice.
But I just couldn't do it, so this resonates with me for a different reason.
You would have to do draw the word with your foot, like that character in the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. I also had a terrible spelling bee story in, I think, 4th grade, either 4th or 5th grade. We had a thing at our school where basically you would do the spelling bee in just your class, and then they would take a winner from each class, and then they would all compete against each other, which feels very unfair to the first graders that were in the mix because I went to a K through 8 school. But I remember I got to the first round. I think it started with 4-letter words and then 5, and then they would go up like that. Maybe not, because then it would be really obvious to know how many letters, but they definitely started with easier words. And the vice principal, Mrs. Pramberger, I will completely put her on blast here. She was in charge of it, and she said, colt. And I said, like the horse? And she said, yes. And I said, C-O-L-T. And then she said, no, C-U-L-T. And I said, that's not the horse. But she had already moved on at that point. I felt bad, but then my friend John, who was the year below me, his opening word was soda. And he just blitzed through and went, soda, S-O-A-D, shoot. And then immediately got disqualified. So right after me not being wrong, but getting eliminated, my buddy John made a big goof. So it was okay. But I will never forgive Mrs. Pramberger. I probably wasn't going to win because I was good enough to win in my class. I wasn't a god of spelling, but I felt robbed for sure. So if you're a dyslexic listener that is good at spelling, let me know. I want to see if that's a thing or not, and I can talk about it in a future episode. Annabeth says, you know what I mean? And Percy says that Tyson can go if he wants to. Tyson claps his hands and says that he wants to go. Annabeth shoots Percy an evil eye, but Percy goes, we'll deal with that later, which is a great approach. I love their dynamic. When she realizes that Percy's mind is made up, Annabeth asks, how are we going to get to the boat? And PJ relays that Hermes told him Poseidon would help. And Annabeth says, well then, seaweed brain, what are you waiting for? Fantastic. A+ stuff. I love it.
I love their banter. It's so cute.
It's so cute. I do want to ask before we get farther, what were the components of your DIY Annabeth outfit? Were you Camp Annabeth? Were you a different Annabeth? No spoilers unless you're like, if you were book 3 Annabeth.
Yeah. So the current official art for the Percy Jackson series I know was done by a fan that Rick then made the official art because the original official art was really bad.
I've heard about this.
I don't think Annabeth was particularly bad, but Percy was really, really, really bad. Mm-hmm. So I went off the original art for Annabeth. So it was an orange Camp Half-Blood shirt that I had dyed mixing yellow and pink dye from a tie-dye kit.
Oh my God. You as a current 22-year-old would love this shirt, I'm assuming.
I'm so mad that I don't have it anymore. I'm pretty sure I threw it out when I outgrew it. But I had tie-dyed this shirt and then I used Sharpie to do the Camp Half-Blood. And then I bought a denim baseball cap from Michael's and painted the Yankees logo on it because a real Yankees cap would have been really expensive and it was very cheap to DIY it. And
aren't you from Boston? So that probably would have...
I'm from Baltimore.
Baltimore. Okay. I was going to say, if you were in Boston, that would have been a crime.
Yeah. And then I bought a plastic knife from Party City and painted it with bronze paint.
Amazing.
And then I just wore jeans because I'm pretty sure she wears jeans in the book and that was my costume.
Amazing. If you have a photo of this, we got to put this on the Instagram.
I do. I was going to send it to you.
Thank God. Amazing.
And that year it snowed on Halloween. So when I went out trick-or-treating, I had to wear a winter coat over my shirt because it was way too cold to be wearing a t-shirt. So everyone asked me, "Are you a baseball player?
Oh,
Who are you?"
no.
And then I was trying to explain, "No, I'm this book character. She's my favorite book character." But none of the adults around me read Percy Jackson, so none of them knew what I was talking about.
Oh,
And they were
cool,
like,
Sherry.
"Cool,
Yeah, great."
okay, here's some candy." I was also like getting to the age where I was like kind of too old to be trick-or-treating. So yeah, it was disappointing because none of my friends were book nerds, so no one really appreciated my costume except for me.
That's all that really matters, though.
Yeah.
That is a key component. As someone who also grew up in the Northeast when I did most of my trick-or-treating, you have to factor in warmth into your outfit. I wore a lot of things where it was turtlenecks, painted things, or I was Buzz Lightyear one year and I had to wear a bunch of layers underneath Buzz Lightyear pajamas that I had so that it would be warm enough. It's always a key factor you have to put into play when you're New Jersey trick-or-treating.
Yeah, I knew that, but I refused to dress warm because I always wanted to be princesses, or either a year before or 2 years before I was Annabeth, I was Athena.
Oh, cool.
I had bought a Greek goddess costume from Party City, and I said, I'm Athena because yes. And the costume is very cold, so I think that year when I went trick-or-treating, I actually wore my sister's devil costume or something. I didn't end up wearing that to go trick-or-treating because my mom said I would freeze to death.
Well, shout out to your mom for keeping you safe. Maybe one day, next year, next time you go to a costume party, you can be Athena and relive the glory that you didn't get to have. So Percy steps into the water and in very smooth fashion says, Dad, how's it going? Annabeth immediately yells at him to hurry it up and do a better job of calling/preying upon his dad. And narrator Percy's assessment of him struggling, because earlier he said, I really struggle to do this. Absolutely spot on, Percy. You nailed it. You are bad at this. Annabeth reminds him, hey, let's cut to the chase. And I wrote in my notes, the Magnus Chase, am I right? And then wrote, I have no idea who that is.
I also have no idea.
He's in one of the books I know.
Actually, I do know. I Wikipedia'd him.
Okay.
Out of curiosity when I was editing the episode you did with Erica and Carter.
Okay.
So now I know, but I will not be giving spoilers.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so afraid of Wikipediaing because there was one time, I don't remember what I did for Harry Potter. I think it was a minor character, but sometimes Wiki or fan wikis, the second line will say something to the effect of,
they're dead.
Exactly. Right. It'll be this character who dies in book 4. Like, what are we doing? This is the auto thing on Google. Come on, leave the spoilers for a little bit lower. So Percy asks for Poseidon's help, and after a brief pause, 3 horses from the crests of waves appear, and Tyson screams, fish ponies! Never change, Tyson. Never change. But Tyson is right. I thought it was the classic thing where the horses were made out of the waves, but actually it's horses rising from the waves, and not just horses. They are horse in the front, fish in the back, El Camino type, but Annabeth says that these are called Hippocampi, which I know nothing about in terms of mythology. Obviously, I know that that's a part of the brain, but that's about it. But I think it's very cool.
I like how they were described with rainbow tail fins. The image that this put in my brain was that Rainbow Fish children's picture book.
I was going to say that book, yeah.
With a huge like white horse head on the front.
That's great. I love that a lot. I definitely imagine that pattern. And now we'll have to see if there's a Very Hungry Caterpillar reference that'll come because those books, hand in hand, baby. So things get even more intense because the Harpies now see the kids. And narrator Percy says, quote, 5 of them were fluttering over the top of the dunes, plump little hags with pinched faces and talons and feathery wings too small for their bodies. Plump little hags, great Percy Jackson trivia team name. Narrator Percy continues, they reminded me of miniature cafeteria ladies who'd been crossbred with dodo birds. What a mental picture for Rick to paint.
Yes.
So fantastic. Because weirdly, I could exactly see what these look like.
Yeah. Very much reminded me of that character in Spirited Away. I think her name was Baba Yaga.
Yes.
The like giant bird witch lady.
Yes. Terrifying. Gosh, nightmare fuel. And I saw that for the first time in college and it still kept me up at night. What a great movie though. So they grab their bags, they mount the Hippocampi, and they race off. Percy notes that riding them is easier than riding Pegasi, which makes sense because water horses. They approach the cruise ship, which is absolutely huge. Percy compares it to being the size of a building in Manhattan, which inherently is not a very helpful measurement because the range of building heights is very high, and I know this so in-depthly because of all the research I did for the first episode of Modern Muckraker, where we answered the question, when should Spider-Man take the subway instead of web swinging? We did all this research into the building heights in Manhattan by neighborhood and all of that. The average building height in Manhattan is 4 to 5 stories. But if you go to the financial district with all the skyscrapers, the average building height is like 30 stories. It's so different. So to say just a building, not super helpful. But he does go on to say, I think that it's about 10 stories tall. So a medium-sized building in Manhattan.
When I read this, I misread it as a boat the size of Manhattan. So then I imagine a gigantic ship.
Just 78 Titanic. I mean, not even that. Manhattan is quite long. It's so huge. That would be very funny. Just all of the next chapters. We made our way down the corridor. We made our way down the corridor. We kept making our way down the corridor. And we saw person that we'll see in the next chapter. So narrator Percy clarifies, the white hull was at least 10 stories tall, topped with another dozen levels of decks with brightly lit balconies and portholes. The ship's name was painted just above the bow line, or sorry, this is a boat, so the bow line, just above the bow line in black letters, lit with a spotlight. It took me a few seconds to decipher it, but it read Princess Andromeda. So narrator Percy notes that attached to the bow is a huge masthead of a woman wearing a white Greek tunic sculpted to look like she's chained to the front of the ship and screaming in terror. And Percy wonders why anybody would want that. And I thought, yes, correct. Nothing is better than Statler and Waldorf, the two Muppets on the front of the boat in Muppet Treasure Island. You cannot get better than that. But in my notes, I wrote here, I'm assuming this has to do with the story of Princess Andromeda, maybe. And then I said, Dr. Moya can fill me in about this. But no, narrator Percy beats me to it. The next line, quote, I remembered the myth about Andromeda and how she had been chained to a rock by her own parents as a sacrifice to a sea monster. Maybe she'd gotten too many F's on her report card or something. Anyway, my namesake Percy had saved her just in time and turned the sea monster to stone using the head of Medusa. He's such a good storyteller. Yeah. I love it.
I love how just matter of fact he is. He recounts the story then. Anyway, moving on.
Right. And it's something I appreciate more now in book 2, because when I talked to Amanda Marin about ADHD in our in-between episode, she said that for storytelling, she told us about how her husband does this with stories where he gives a very non-direct version. So now the way that Percy tells these stories when he does the Greek recaps, there usually is one line where he kind of goes off on some sort of tangent. And now it makes sense and I really appreciate it. And it's something that I could see someone with ADHD reading this book and really feeling seen by the way Percy tells the story.
Yeah. And also, if you have read the rest of this book, you'll know that this kind of alludes to something that happens later in the plot.
Ooh, a very good little seed planting that I know nothing about. The perfect way to do it. So narrator Percy then goes on to say that Perseus always won, and he was a rare hero that actually has a happy ending. He says that Sally named Percy after Perseus, even though Perseus was a son of Zeus, so that hopefully PJ would have similar luck. But then narrator Percy says, quote, judging by how my life was going so far, I wasn't real optimistic. Phenomenal. Love it. Great. So just as Annabeth asks Percy, how do we get aboard, the Hippocampi swim over to the side of the ship, which has a service ladder. Annabeth and Percy get up. Tyson lags behind because his hippocampus, quote, was treating him to 360-degree aerials and backward ollies. And Uncle Rick has never sounded more like a dad. It just very much is giving the vibe of Uncle Rick Googled skateboard words. Or maybe he asked Jeeves them because it was 2006 or whatever. But Tyson is loving this. He's laughing very loudly. And we learn that Tyson has named his hippocampus Rainbow. He's very sad that Rainbow cannot join them. And you know who else is sad? Rainbow the hippocampus. Rainbow has skyrocketed up my favorite character rankings. Oh my gosh. If Rainbow does not come back, I will be heartbroken. But at the very least, I feel like Rainbow has really big potential to be underrated fan favorite type character because it's just the majesty of Rainbow. Whew, really good stuff.
I will not be spoiling anything.
Thank you. So they climb up the ladder, and it leads to a maintenance deck with lifeboats, and Annabeth is able to get through a locked set of double doors, quote, with her knife and a fair amount of cursing in ancient Greek. Annabeth. Flawless.
I would like to know what she was cursing.
Yeah, I know. Maybe if they made the adult version, the rated T for teen or whatever, that would have been very fun. Maybe that could be a question I ask Uncle Rick. What Greek curses were Annabeth saying here? But now that they're in the boat, I think this is a nice natural transition for us to take a brief pause here for the sea of sponsors. Now's the part where I edit stuff in, Sherry, because I always record the ad reads way later.
Hello and welcome to the Sea of Sponsors. Now, if you actually hear some ocean noises in the background, that would be the Indian Ocean, because I'm currently in the Maldives on vacation, and I'm recording this from our deck because 1, less echo, but 2, cool ocean vibes for a podcast currently about a book called The Sea of Monsters. It felt pretty fitting, so here we go. First, to touch on a topic that we just covered in the episode, it's something I didn't say in the recording, but I wish I did as an avid Tony Hawk's Pro Skater player of all games from the 4th installment onwards. I played those games until my PS2 discs melted, and something that Rick said in the book was backwards ollies, and I should have clarified that there is an actual skateboarding term for that. It's called a fakie ollie. Fakie's when you do tricks when you're riding backwards, and I wish I would have said that because, Rick, if you need someone to help you sound less like a dad when you're talking about skateboard stuff, you can hire me as a consultant. Anyway, on to some other updates. We just added 3 new live shows to the 2022 Pot Tour list. This is the tour of live shows I've been doing with my old Harry Potter podcast, Potterless. We've added 3 new shows: July 16th in Asbury Park, New Jersey, my homeland; on July 28th in Jacksonville, Florida, location of the Sea of Monsters, ? And on August 4th in St. Louis, Missouri. If you want to get tickets to these shows, in addition to our upcoming shows in Seattle, Phoenix, Indianapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis/St. Paul, you can go to potterlesspodcast.com/live. It's a very fun time. It's a very silly time. I think you would enjoy it. If you live near one of these cities, come through. I'd love to see your face. Speaking of faces I would love to see the faces of all the folks who are supporting the show on Patreon. I'm very thankful to all of those folks. If you go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon, you can support the show and get access to a whole bunch of bonus content, including bonus episodes, director's commentary, access to my notes, whole bunch of fun stuff, monthly live streams. It's a blast, and I want to thank the newest members of our team over at thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. So shout out to our newest God tier patrons, Jason Lynch, All That Jazz, Sprinny, and What Is Games? And yes, that is games with a Z. Shout out to our newest super God tier patrons, Katie Thomas and Hannah, or Hannah. It's Hana. I'm not sure. I'm going to say both just in case. And shout out to our newest demigod tier patrons, Jamie Stone, Autumn Cunningham, Abigail, Sam Howell, Happy Birthday, Charlotte. Yes, that was all caps with 3 exclamation points, and Jason Minnick, or Jason Minnich. This is a very, I'm not sure which way the pronunciation goes, edition of thanking the patrons, but I'm just going to say both ways that I think it might be to cover all my bases. And finally, a name correction for Alyssa Nevitt. Thank you all so much for your support. May Demeter bless all of your house plants with good health. And speaking of support, I want to thank Multitude for having us as a part of the collective. There are a whole bunch of wonderful podcasts that Multitude puts out on a regular basis. So if you're all caught up on TNO, you're all caught up on podcasts that I make, you're still looking for more, you should check out some of the other shows from Multitude. And one of those shows is Exolore, which is hosted by Dr. Moya McTeer, who you might recognize from the newest Olympian. If you've ever wondered what life would be like on a planet different from our own, or how writers create your favorite fictional worlds, Exolore is the pod for you. Astrophysicist/folklorist Dr. Moya McTeer explores fictional worlds every episode with expert guests. She interviews professional world builders, or she will review the merits of worlds that have already been built. You will learn, you will laugh, and you will gain an appreciation for how special our planet really is. You can listen today by searching for Exolore in your podcasting app, so EXOLORE is how you spell it, or you can go to exolorepod.com. And finally, before we wrap up here, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. Some of these ads will be read by me, others of them won't. The ones that are not read by me are inserted locally, so if you live in the Maldives, don't be surprised if you get a Maldivian ad. And once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of The Newest Olympian.
And we're back! Woo! So Percy thinks that they're going to have to sneak around, but they soon realize that no one is here. They pass 50 cabin doors and they don't hear a single peep, so they feel like they're in the clear. Percy says it's a ghost ship, which, given Greek stuff, I didn't know if he meant ghost as in abandoned or ghost as in ghost, so anything's to play there. Tyson says it has a bad smell.
Immediate red flag.
Yes. To quote JoJo, get out, leave, right now. Come on, you gotta
Immediately
get out of here. Just get the hell out of here. And Annabeth says she doesn't smell anything, which means nothing. Cannot trust her nose, as we've seen in the past. Percy points out that Cyclops are like satyrs and can smell monsters. Did we ever learn this before? Is this new information?
I don't think it is, because in the chapter where they were having the dodgeball fight, I'm pretty sure Tyson had said they smell bad.
Right.
About the Lastrygonian giants.
Yes, I remember Tyson pointing it out, but I guess I didn't know that Percy knew this. But he knows enough about Greek stuff and has been at the camp, and I'm not surprised that he would know it. Maybe he even asked someone, hey, I have a Cyclops for a half brother now. Can you tell me some fun facts? So maybe that was it. But I will say, one, that is cool. But two, very convenient for Cyclops to have this ability in the book where Grover's not here yet. So that worked out very well for them. But it's a YA book. We need someone who can smell this stuff. Sure. Tyson confirms that he can smell monsters. Narrator Percy notes that the mist is back, so it's distorting Tyson's face. He has to really focus to see that he has one eye and not two. Annabeth asks Tyson to describe the smell, and Tyson says something bad. And then Annabeth replies, great, that clears it up, which I think is very unfair. I don't like this retort from her because Grover never gave specific answers, right? He would just point out it smells bad. He didn't say, this smells like someone who's a fishy salesman of sorts, or it smells like the person here might have snakes for hair. Like, he never pointed out specifics, did he?
Yeah, I feel like maybe at most he would say, I smell monsters. But I think other than that, it would just be something smells bad.
Right. So maybe that is what Annabeth was referring to in the most generous read, is that she's looking for Tyson to at least say that he smells monsters. But what else has smelled bad in these books before? They have never come upon a trash can that hasn't been taken out in a couple of days or something.
I feel like Annabeth is just very much the type of person where if she doesn't know everything that's going on, or she's not the one with all the information, she gets frustrated because she wants to be the best at everything.
Yeah. That makes sense. So they get to the swimming pool level and the water is glowing eerily, which I don't like. Narrator Percy says, quote, above us, fore and aft were more levels. A climbing wall, a putt-putt golf course, a revolving restaurant, but no sign of life. I had to Google what fore and aft meant, and I've learned that it is the nautical way to say in front of you and behind you, well done, Percy, you boat boy.
I think he only knows those words because he's the son of Poseidon.
Right. It's got to be one of those things where he just says it and doesn't even realize what he's saying. Or maybe he heard it in some other way when he did a Montauk visit. Who's to say? Now, the other thing this could be like KP being kitchen patrol, where just because I don't know it doesn't mean anything. The amount of emails and messages I got from people who either had family in the military or did ROTC or whatever that said, oh, KP is a super common military term for kitchen patrol. I don't know. The closest I've ever been to the military is one time my college played in a bowl football game and it was the Armed Forces Bowl. That's my closest thing. I don't even know what ROTC stands for. So I don't know anything. I'm not a frame of reference. Maybe fore and aft is very well known. I've barely ever been on boats before, and I'm not fancy enough to own a boat or know how to sail, so my apologies. The only reason I know port and starboard and some other things is because of SpongeBob SquarePants. So Percy has a sinking feeling that something is wrong. Maybe it was the part where your friend who can smell monsters said things smell bad, but he's so burned out that he just can't put a finger on it. He says they need a safe place to sleep. Annabeth agrees. She makes it very clear that she is very tired, and they find a suite on the 9th floor with an open door. Don't like this at all. I was getting flashbacks to the casino that they stayed in.
Yes, I was just about to say.
There's welcome gifts in the room. Big nopes. Don't like this either, though I do love a welcome gift in a hotel. It's always nice when you get fun welcome gifts. I highly recommend anyone, when you make a booking, in the notes section, find the closest thing that you have an excuse to celebrate and throw it in. I did that with my birthday recently when Kelly and I took a trip and they gave us a bunch of free stuff, which was cool. We were there like 2 days after my birthday, which was valid. So maybe don't lie, but if you can find something, go for it. So they open their bags and Hermes absolutely nailed it. Inside, they've got extra clothes, toiletries, camp rations, a Ziploc bag full of cash, and a leather pouch full of golden drachmas. He even packed Tyson's oilcloth with his tools and metal bits and Annabeth's cap of invisibility, which made them both feel better. So, great job, Hermes. You've packed well. Annabeth says that she'll be next door and warns them, don't eat or drink anything. Percy asks if she thinks it's enchanted, and she says something isn't right. It's very clear they all recognize that something is wrong, yet they still sleep here. Made me very uncomfortable. So Tyson starts working on his mystery metal project before falling asleep. They don't tell us what it is, so clearly this will become very important at the end of the story. Percy starts to doze off, and he thinks he hears whispering in the halls, but he tells himself that's impossible and falls asleep. And then he has a dream, which he, as the narrator, describes as his worst dream yet. Didn't give me a fun feeling in the pit of my stomach. Speaking of pits, first thing he says is, quote, I was standing in a cavern at the edge of an enormous pit. Immediately, I was distraught, writing no with a bunch of O's in my notes, and then thinking of Inception. I thought, kick the chair, you gotta wake up. So unfortunately, Kronos is back. Kronos, in his Kronos voice, says, if it isn't the young hero on his way to another great victory. And Percy wants to strike him down, but in classic dream fashion, can't bring himself to move. He continues and he says, don't let me stop you. Perhaps this time, when you fail, you'll wonder if it's all worthwhile slaving for the gods. How exactly has, and this is the rare case when it's in unitalics, because his entire quote is in italics, so has is in not italics. How exactly has your father shown his appreciation lately? And then I thought, he just sent the coolest means of transportation ever. It was a very recent example of showing his love. Kronos laughs, and then the scene changes. It is now the cave where Grover is, and Percy is able to get a true sense of the Cyclops' size. He is absolutely massive, about 15 feet tall, and he's wearing a shirt that says World Sheep Expo 2001.
This would be great merch.
Oh, that would be great merch. I don't want to get sued, but I feel like I could make this merch that is very fun. I'll at least add it to the list of potential possible TNO merch items. Thank you for this wonderful suggestion. The Cyclops then goes over to Grover, asks Grover, what are you doing? Grover says he's working on the bridal train, and the Cyclops says it hasn't grown. Grover says he's added at least an inch, and then we get this exchange. Too many delays. You smell good, like goats? Oh, do you like it? It's eau de chèvre. Do you know enough French to know what that translates to?
I do. Okay. I took French for 6 years.
Amazing. Hey, I took Latin in high school.
So I always love it when authors in any form of writing use French, because my speaking and listening abilities have always been horrendous, but I can read well enough to understand. So it just means like perfume of goat.
Oh, amazing. Okay, good. Yeah.
O is water.
Right. Yeah.
But perfume.
Yeah. When you do water of, it's a perfume. Yes. Okay. So of goat. Perfect. Yes. Grover says, I wore just for you. Good enough to eat. Oh, you're such a flirt. No more delays. But dear, I'm not done. Tomorrow. No, 10 more days. 5. Oh, well, 7 then, if you insist. 7? That is less than 5, right? Certainly. Oh, yes. So good. Gosh, I miss Grover so much. He's so great. I'm glad he's at least coming in enough so that we still don't go more than 3 chapters without a fun Grover joke. So I miss him dearly, but I'm glad he's still in our lives.
Yes.
The Cyclops walks away grumbling. Grover is nervous as heck and mutters, hurry, Percy, please, please, please. And that's the end of the dream. Honestly, I was expecting it to be worse.
Yeah, I feel like this wasn't as bad as some of his other ones in the first book.
Right. I guess what he's saying, maybe he means worst dream this book. Maybe he's saying it's the worst because he thought he was done dealing with Kronos and now Kronos is back. But yeah, certainly some of those other Kronos dreams were scarier just looking at just the dream, not necessarily the stakes, but it wasn't that scary. We just had Kronos saying something vague and ominous and then Grover being scared, but maybe Percy's really concerned for Grover. I don't know, but I was really expecting something truly horrendous here, and it wasn't that bad. Percy wakes to the sound of a man with what sounds like an Australian accent who gives these cruise announcements that start normal, but then he goes on to mention that they have $1 million bingo, and then the final thing he mentions is disemboweling practice. And Percy asks Tyson, what did he say? And Tyson says bowling practice? But then Annabeth frantically sticks her head in, she's got wild bedhead, and says, disemboweling practice? Fantastic. Love it. So they get dressed, and surprisingly, they start to see other people on the boat. It's a very normal-looking crew and passengers, but there's some red flags. First, no one pays them any attention. But 2, the simulation is pretty busted. If you've ever seen that Rick and Morty episode where they are doing the fake thing and they have to do things like human music for Jerry, it's very base level stuff. I'm also just going to get the record out there that I'm one of the people that just likes Rick and Morty, not likes it that much and yells at people about ketchup packets. One of the passengers is a dad who talks to his kid and says, we are on a cruise. We are having fun. And the kids go, yes, we are having a blast. We will swim in the pool. It's fantastic. And given that the Percy Jackson show, I think it's been announced that they're going to start filming in June of 2022. It's going to wrap in early 2023 because they're using kid actors and it always takes longer. By the time they are working on the Sea of Monsters show, I should be old enough to be, conceivably, a dad. And I don't know if I will be big enough to be cast in a bit role. But if I could be cast as this dad in the Sea of Monsters TV show, yes, please. I would live for this role.
Someone start a Twitter petition.
Yes. Is TikTok the most efficient way? I don't know. I definitely want to be cast in something, because they did that for the Gilmore Guys when they did the Gilmore Girls reboot. They were just people in a coffee shop. It would be very cool if I got it in a very, very, very minimal way. I'm also not expecting it. I would just like Uncle Rick to come on the pod. So then a crew member gives a very standard welcome to them. And this is certainly suspicious. But more suspicious is that there's a hellhound in the cafeteria. It is smaller than usual, but it is still the size of a grizzly bear. And what's even sketchier is that this hellhound is just in line for food. And even sketchier beyond that is that there's a middle-aged couple behind the hellhound in line for food, and they think nothing of this. So alarm bells ringing all over the place, red flags everywhere.
Why are they still on this ship?
It's clearly not real people or whatever, but we will learn what's going on. Then, if things weren't weird enough, Percy hears a reptilian voice say 6 more joined yesterday. And then they dive into the women's restroom to hide. And narrator Percy notes that he was so scared that he didn't even think to be embarrassed. Classic teenager to be even considering things like this under such intense circumstances. Now, there's a second reptilian voice that says, yes, he draws them. Soon we will be strong. And this made me worried. Wait a second. Can we not trust Hermes? Is Hermes coming in and doing beach-like ruses to people to try to get them onto the boat? Is this not just some sort of other scheme? Is Hermes actually the Ares of this book, where seems like he's our friend? Hermes definitely more than Ares, seems like a friend, but I was immediately worried that this is all an elaborate Hermes scheme. And then I was really worried because he's the trickster god, so like, yeah, maybe.
Interesting.
Annabeth says, we have to get out of here. Percy goes, you think I want to be in the girls' restroom? And Annabeth says, I mean the ship, Percy. We have to get off the ship. God, perfect. I want them to get together so badly now. I know I've been kind of towing the line before. I really need them to get together because Percabeth, which I have been corrected, it's Percabeth and not Percybeth. Percabeth is just beautiful. It needs to happen.
I always thought it was Percabeth. I don't know why, but Percabeth makes a lot more sense.
I would think so. Tyson agrees, which is how Percy knows that things are bad, because Tyson and Annabeth are in agreement on something. But just when you think things are really weird and bad and terrible, Percy hears Luke's voice. They hear Luke mid-conversation say, only a matter of time, don't push me, Agrius. And then Agrius says, I'm not pushing you, I'm just saying, if this gamble doesn't pay off, and Luke says, it'll pay off, they'll take the bait. And again, I was worried, oh, is Hermes the bait? Now come, we've got to get to the Admiralty suite and check on the casket. Tyson asks, can we leave now? Annabeth and Percy exchange looks and silently agree that they can't. Percy tells Tyson that they cannot because they have to find out what Luke is up to. And this chapter ends with Annabeth saying, quote, and if possible, we're going to beat him up, bind him in chains, and drag him to Mount Olympus, which feels like a bit much, but I can completely understand Annabeth hating Luke even more than Percy hating Luke because of their past. So go off, Annabeth. You do you. And that's the end of chapter 8. So then we get into chapter 9, which is called I Have the Worst Family Reunion Ever. And again, a very fun chapter title, but in terms of me trying to guess things, my guess here was, they're going to talk to Luke? Not really a stretch for this one. Annabeth wants to investigate alone because she's got the invisibility cap. Percy says no, either we all go together or no one goes. And Tyson goes, nobody, please, which phenomenal.
And this kind of also alludes to something later.
Okay, all right, cool. So Tyson ends up joining in the end. He is nervous, but he also insists on carrying all the bags for everyone because since he's so large, it's very easy for him. I really like that he's bringing a lot to the table. We've seen his smelling ability, now his size, and soon we'll see his strength. So they're sneaking through the halls and they overhear someone talking about an Ethiopian draken in the cargo hold. Do you know anything about this?
I have no idea.
Okay, Dr. Moya will help us out. I don't know if this is just a weird way to say Ethiopian, where you just put an A in front of it. If it's some sort of African mythical beast, my guess was just a dragon from Ethiopia, but I have no idea. Annabeth points out that one of the people talking was Chris Rodriguez, a former Cabin 11 camper. And I was immediately worried, is just everything that Hermes' cabin touches bad? Are all the campers bad? Is Hermes himself bad? I was really, really worried about Hermes and Hermes-related things here. But narrator Percy details that Chris was an undetermined camper. And come to think of it, Percy hadn't seen him this past summer. So I can calm down on my Hermes alarm a little bit, but I'm still not feeling great at this point.
I don't remember being introduced to Chris Rodriguez in the last book.
I do not think he existed in the last book. I think it's a classic thing where, yeah, Chris has been here the whole time, and there just weren't that many named campers. We don't have a lot of people who are named that aren't important, which is why I think people like Beckendorf are going to become big deals, because so far, if you get named, you're going to be someone who comes back and has an effect. We don't have people like Justin Finch Fletchly in Harry Potter, where he gets name dropped and then we really don't hear much about him, or Anthony Goldstein or whatever. But anyway, Chris Rodriguez, who we've known all along, wasn't at camp this year, and that is concerning to Percy. Now, they keep going through the cruise ship, and Percy can sense Luke's evil, which is very cool, but also, how? Is this just a demigod thing? Is it a Poseidon-specific thing? Is Percy just making this up? Is this a power? What's going on here?
I think it's maybe in his head, or he's just on high alert now.
Ooh, okay. So through a glass wall, they see the promenade, where they can see 12 Laestrygonians, 2 hellhounds, a partridge in a pear tree, and some humanoid females with twin serpent tails instead of legs. Annabeth says that they are Scythian Dracani, and she translates this because I thought, what? And she immediately says that they are dragon women. Do you know anything about these?
No idea.
Dr. Moya, come through. Future episode. So there's also a young guy in Greek armor hacking away at a training dummy in an orange Camp Half-Blood shirt, much to the delight of the surrounding monsters. So our trio moves on, and they are about to enter a set of oak double doors, but Tyson warns them that there are voices inside. Percy is impressed by his hearing ability, that he can hear people on the other side of doors. Tyson closes his eyes to focus, and he does these close enough impressions of what he's hearing of Luke and the other guy from before, Agrius. So Tyson starts imitating Luke mid-sentence, and Tyson Luke says, "The prophecy ourselves, the fools won't know which way to turn." And then Agrius Tyson says, "You really think the old horseman is gone for good?" And then Tyson Luke laughs and says they can't trust him, not with the skeletons in his, in italics, closet. The poisoning of the tree was the final straw. But then the three of them start talking a little bit, and then Tyson continues the imitations, but it's very clear that they hear them talking on the other side of the door, so they try to get away, but the doors burst open before they can leave, and it's Luke with 2 hairy giants equipped with bronze-tipped javelins. So Luke brings them in, and he calls Annabeth and Percy his favorite cousins, which I'm just going to try to put out of my brain because I want to ship Annabeth and Percy together, and I do not want to think about them as cousins, because they're also not first cousins. They're certainly many, many removed. This is a thing that my aunt used to do because I have 0 first cousins, and she felt bad about that, I guess, because she's partially responsible, but you're a nun, Aunt Judy. What are you going to do? You can't. I never had any first cousins. I would have all these other cousins who were like my second or my third or my fourth cousins, and she would always frame them as, "Oh, it's your cousin whoever." And my parents would always have to say, "They're not really your cousins."
I don't understand how cousins work.
Do you also not have any cousins? Or
I have cousins, but both my parents are the youngest siblings by a lot in their families. So all of them are way older, so I don't know how cousins work.
Yeah, I understand first cousin because it's pretty simple. But once you get beyond that, and then once you get into removed things, it's bad. And I've had people try to explain it to me, and look, it's never going to happen. Save me your family trees. It's just part of my brain that I don't need to fill with this information, so it's all good. So after this, narrator Percy says, the stateroom was beautiful, and it was horrible. So the good, it's got huge windows along the back wall overlooking the sea above the stern. There's a Persian rug, there's a mahogany dining table, and on this table is a bunch of food. So now onto the bad. There is a 10-foot-long casket on a velvet dais at the back of the room, and to make it worse, it's engraved with ancient Greek scenes of cities in flames and heroes dying. Now, I thought that this was already terrible. And before I even knew who was in this casket, I just didn't like this from the vibes. But a far scarier thing with much worse vibes is that Luke has traded in his Bermuda shorts and t-shirt for a button-down shirt, khakis, and leather loafers. Disgusting. disgusting.
The image that came up in my brain, because Rick writes that he looked like an evil male model, showing off what the fashionable college-age villain was wearing to Harvard this year, was a cross between an Abercrombie model and super preppy military.
Okay, yeah. I was imagining the military vibe I get because it later says he's
haircut.
Shaved his head, basically. He's clipped it really short. I was imagining just the worst frat bro from Vineyard Vines.
Yes, but with a military haircut.
Yes. But I just think it's so funny that at the time this was written, 2006, 2007, what Uncle Rick was trying to get across is that Luke is become stuffy and boring. But weirdly, because of the way things have aged, I get that that's what he's going for, but also now I assume because he's dressing like a frat bro that he's evil. And also, this is an important distinction to bring up here is for my young millennial, I gotta try to feel better about it. I'm barely a millennial, I promise I'm only 30. For my young millennialness, this is just frat bro, polo, Vineyard Vines, all that kind of stuff, boat shoes, etc. If someone was wearing this in your Gen Z understanding of fashion and stuff, what is the thought here for khakis button down and leather loafers?
I think it's still frat bro.
Yeah,
I don't think they've changed.
Okay.
Also, to make you feel better, I was really obsessed with BuzzFeed in 2015. And because BuzzFeed was run by millennials, I was convinced I was a millennial.
Okay.
And I was really offended when Gen Z became a term because they said that it was 97 onwards or something. And I was born in 2000 and I was really offended because I thought Gen Z was newborns and I was offended to be associated with newborns. But turns out I am Gen Z and I was just convinced by BuzzFeed that I was a millennial.
Gen Z's had an interesting come up where I think it is now fully gone into a positive light in terms of Gen Z's done so many cool things like mess up Trump rallies by buying free tickets and using TikTok for good and just thwarting old stuffy people. I think the key is that Gen Z is the true rival to boomers who are actively ruining America every day.
Yes.
And us as millennials, we're already so burnt out by being so screwed over by these boomers, but then also blamed for everything where it's not our fault that the housing market is awful. But then these old people are telling us, if you didn't buy avocado toast,
I remember reading that article.
It's so bad.
On BuzzFeed.
Oh, it's so bad. And then there would just be all these things from Business Insider where they would say, millennials are killing the napkin industry and all this stuff where just stop yelling at us for everything. We're just trying our best. We're never going to be able to retire. Please just go easy on us. The world is out to get us. But we were already burnt out by the time. You are all young enough to use your youth for good and defeat the boomers. So I think it's now a good thing.
Yeah. I will say, I was convinced that I should be worrying about buying a house at 15 because I thought I was a millennial. I'm nowhere near buying a house. I'm not even done college.
I don't think anyone is near buying a house. Even when people say they've bought a house, they haven't bought a house. You just have a mortgage now. When people my age now brag about having a house, you've done nothing cooler than me for paying rent. You are just paying rent to the bank. And then if something breaks in your house, you have to fix it. If I have something that breaks in my apartment, I call maintenance. And yes, I have to deal with landlords who are the worst. But also, if the roof caves in, it's not my fault. I don't have to deal with it. So when people say, oh, look, we bought a house, we're homeowners. No, you're not. You have a mortgage. You inherently do not own your house.
You will own your house in 30 years.
Exactly.
Unless you move.
Right. I don't know. It's one of these things that I have friends that live in, these middle of nowhere towns or people I went to college with that are still in Texas where you can buy a house for 35 cents. And yeah, of course, I'm not going to be able to buy a house. I live in cool places. I don't have that kind of money. Anyway, Percy Jackson. We've done a good job of sticking to the story for the most part. This isn't your classic laundry and pizza episode, which I still defend. That episode with Caleb was so good.
I agree with everything that was said.
Yes, I will say that was the most, what I will do behind the scenes, since you're here, how the sausage of TNO gets made. You usually send me over the weekend, the episode that's going to come out a week from the Monday that's approaching. The first thing I do is download it, open it up, and look at all of the editing sherry things and just listen to those to see how many of those are you saying, hey, Mike, you said the wrong word, you big goof. And then I write in my notes, go to the studio this week and record you saying this sentence. So I always listen to the editing sherry notes you leave me right off the bat. And when I opened that episode with Caleb, I saw 5 and I was really worried that I was a big goof, but it was just you agreeing with my pizza takes, agreeing with my laundry takes, and then also saying, hey, Mike, you said after the break, we're going to focus on the book more. And then you talked about laundry for 15 minutes. which valid, but I still stand by it. If we didn't have tangents, this would just be Sparknotes, the podcast. No one wants to listen to Sparknotes, the podcast. If you want to listen to something that's just Percy Jackson and nothing else, download the audiobook. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway.
However, I would not say the audiobooks are great.
I know. I've heard so many complaints about the audiobook narrators.
I actually had a question because I've been listening to the audiobook. The person who does the narration changes his voice for each character.
Okay.
And I don't think they're great approximations of what I think the character should sound like.
Okay.
And I was wondering, when you read books, do you change voices in your head of the different characters, or do you just read it all as one voice unless they're describing specifically, like with Tyson Luke, of Tyson sounding like Luke, then do you like change the voice in your head?
I usually take the Stephen Fry approach. He did the second version of the Harry Potter audiobooks, and I prefer them to the Jim Dale. Jim Dale did all the different voices and stuff. He's very talented, but some of his voices are very annoying, so I didn't like it. What Stephen Fry kind of does is he has young woman voice, young man voice, adult man voice, and adult woman voice, and the narrator voice, and he just kind of switches between those five. I think that's what I do. The only time it's different is if I am reading a book where I know the author from something else and I really know their voice. So if I'm reading a sports book and it's someone who also hosts a podcast, or if it's done by comedians or whatever, then I read the book in their voice because usually they write in that style. But yeah, when I'm reading a narration book like this, it's usually very similar, but with maybe just slight differences. But I do like to, from time to time, think about what they sound like. And I'm just imagining Luke's voice getting douchier and douchier as the book goes on.
Vocal fry goes up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Luke by the end is just like, oh, hey, you guy, just very gross. Anyway, Luke wearing awful clothes, has awful hair, etc. You pointed out the incredible burn from narrator Percy with he looks like a fashionable college-age villain at Harvard. So fantastic. Luke waves his hand, makes 3 chairs slide in front of them, and orders them to sit. None of them do. Great. Narrator Percy then describes the giants. Quote, they looked like twins, but they weren't human. They stood about 8 feet tall and wore only blue jeans, probably because their enormous chests were already shag-carpeted with thick brown fur. They had claws for fingernails, feet like paws. Their noses were snout-like, and their teeth were all pointed canines. Do not want to mess with these folks at all. Luke then introduces them as Agrius and Aureus. Luke says, perhaps you've heard of them, and I sure as heck haven't. Have you before?
No.
Okay. And this was another example of me typing the words, I bet Dr. Moya and then the next line, Luke explains their story. But Percy isn't nervous about the twins. He's nervous about Luke. And despite all of the envisioning he did of their big confrontation, which I can relate to so hard, now that he's actually here, he can't stop his hands from shaking. And this is something I've definitely done. If I've rehearsed an argument in my head and then I actually have the argument, I get really jittery because I don't want to mess it up. So then Luke explains the story of the twins. So Aphrodite ordered their mother to fall in love. The mother refused and sought help from Artemis. Artemis made the mother one of her maiden huntresses, but Aphrodite got revenge by bewitching the mother to fall in love with a bear. Artemis abandoned her in disgust when she found out, and I'm assuming Artemis didn't know that Aphrodite got involved? I assume the disgust was, I can't be associated with someone who's in love with bears, which would be valid if not animal human stuff happening in Greek mythology all of the time. It feels like Artemis should have known someone got involved here.
I think it's more of Artemis is one of the goddesses that swore to be a maiden forever. So it's because the mother fell in love with someone and was no longer a maiden. And that's why Artemis was disgusted.
Yeah. Okay, right. Yeah. Because it's maiden huntress. You're exactly right. And I think that's great. And it gives me more appreciation for Artemis, who is one of my favorite characters in Hades, the video game. I love her approach because her whole vibe is, all of my relatives are the worst, which is phenomenal energy to bring to the table. But yeah, I would like this that, look, if you want to love a bear, you do you. I'm not going to get in the way. You just have to be a maiden, so I am offended. That's great. Thank you so much. That's perfect. Luke cites this as a classic example of the gods fighting with each other and humans getting involved in the middle and them taking the brunt of it. And Luke says that Agrius and Aureus have no love for Olympus, but they like half-bloods. And then Agrius finishes his sentence by saying, for lunch, which is the most we finish each other's sandwiches thing you could possibly do. Aureus laughs way too hard at this joke, which causes Agrius to tell him to punish himself, so he goes into the corner and starts banging his head against the wall. So I think this is a good stopping point because Luke is about to launch into villain speech. And once we start talking about Luke being a villain, I'm not going to be able to stop. And we are certainly at time, but you will be back for the next episode. It will be remote. So everyone at home can decide if they like in-person Mike and Sherry or remote Mike and Sherry better. The big dilemma where recording in person, there's more personality because you're in the same room. But when you're remote editing, it's actually easier because there's no crosstalk. But anyway, that's the end of this episode. Sherry, thank you so much for joining. This is great. I'm glad people get to hear you now.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. If people want to find you doing stuff, is there anything you want to promote other than this really cool podcast you had called The Newest Olympian?
I am on the internet. I'm on TikTok. I'm at Azula the Cheez-It. If you were on Avatar The Last Airbender TikTok in 2020, that name will make sense to you.
All right.
I have not gotten around to changing it, so now I'm just stuck with it. But yeah, I post random videos. They used to be more themed, but now they're just kind of stream of consciousness, random childhood trauma, the usual Gen Z TikTok material.
I would know because I have never downloaded TikTok, and every time people send me DMs with TikToks, I don't watch them. But that is cool, and I am excited to learn what that reference is in 12 years when I make my Avatar The Last Airbender podcast, which definitely will be if I do another one of these. That'll be the next one. But I've got so much Rick stuff to read. I'll be doing this until I'm a million years old. But anyway, Sherry, thank you so much for joining. Listeners, thank you for listening. And until we get to hear Luke's grossly villainous speech, I'll see you later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamanes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you are all caught up on the show and you want some more, you can get some more by going to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. You'll get access to loads of bonus episodes, bonus audio, all the old Potterless stuff, whole bunch of fun things at thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. And speaking of that Patreon, I want to give a huge shout out to our producer level patrons: Lotta Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Emma Cooey, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Houskovchova, Veronica Bartova, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Tough Bayfong, Moo Productions, Don't Call Me Nymphadora, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Minka Dreesen, Can't I Seaweed Brain, Matt Barger, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Boney Pony, Getting Stoned with Smelly Gabe, Heather McMillan, Casey Canales, Polly Burridge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Josh Sayer, Percy Blue, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Shannon Ivanez Aguilar, Wise Girl, Alpacas Are Hope, Milo TZ, Roxas 1912, Rafaela, Ashton Gabrielson, Cara Marin, Colby, Marco Redhouse, Falcon, Joey James, Christopher William Boucher, Justin Lux, Caden Max, Sam Ruby, Carly Allen, Riley Kiedis, Mary Kelly, Audra, Mackenzie, Mrs. O'Leary, Marina Foose, and Erin Wood. If you want to follow the show on social media, we are at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and we're also at reddit.com/r/The Newest Olympian. If you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, spreading it by word of mouth is awesome, and I really appreciate it. You can post about it on social media. You can leave a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're using. You can reach out to someone that you know that you think would like the show, whether it's an email, a text message, whatever, and just say, hey, there's this really cool podcast hosted by this really cool, humble guy, and I think you would enjoy it. If you do that, I would really appreciate it.
But I'm just so thankful that you listened to this episode, and I hope you tune into our next episode, which will also be with Sherry. We will be finishing up Chapter 9 and doing Chapter 10 of The Sea of Monsters. But until then, I'll see you later. Hey everyone, it's ASMR Mike. How's it going? I hope you're doing very well. For this ASMR Mike segment, again, I'm just going to let you hear some of the sounds of where I've been in the world. So I hope you enjoy this long extended audio of waves crashing on the Maldivian shores of the island where Kelly and I are staying for the next few days. I hope you enjoy, and thank you for listening.